This nightmare came out of nowhere. My mom, who always preferred my brother over me, tried to trap me in the middle of the night to make sure her precious boy wouldn't starve. I tried to fight back, but ended up becoming their food. I jolted awake, startled from my nightmare. I looked around the familiar room and instinctively checked my body. My arms and legs were still there. I quickly grabbed my phone. The news was buzzing about a guy walking weirdly down the street, biting people. No doubt. The same headline appeared before. And 8 hours after that, a zombie outbreak would kick off. I checked the time. It was noon. I calmed myself, thinking fast. Around this time, my mom and brother would be out eating. Memories of their past actions stormed into my mind. I couldn't hold back and threw up. My body trembled in fear. The last time, when the disaster hit, we barely had any food at home. But my mom let my brother gobble up what little was left. In the end, we survived on rainwater. Spoiled as he was, my brother couldn't endure it for long. After just a day, he threw a fit demanding meat. But instead of looking for food, they chose a different path. That night, exhaustion and hunger got the better of me, and I passed out. When I woke up, they had tied me to the bed. I saw my brother polishing a tool, eyeing my foot. In terror, I kicked him in the face. Before I could react, my mom screamed, and my brother, furiously holding his face, raised his hand. Pain shot through my foot. Overwhelmed by pain and fear, I screamed. Zombies outside heard and banged wildly on our door. What's with the screaming? Do you want us all dead? My mom snapped, rushing over to slap me. Then she crammed a smelly sock into my mouth and bandaged my injured foot. Days passed. I watched helplessly as they consumed my feet, legs, and arms bit by bit. Once my brother even offered me cooked meat, making me throw up in disgust. In that suffocating environment, without food or entertainment, my brother's mood darkened. I became not just their food, but also his punching bag. The torment seemed endless. My voice, worn out from crying, turned into a rasp. I didn't want to live anymore. Desperately, I looked at my mom, but she ignored my plea, bandaged me up, and reassured me, saying, "You must live. David prefers fresh, drinking rainwater daily." I eventually closed my eyes forever one silent night. Recalling it all, I started shaking uncontrollably. The horror from my past life felt real, like a vivid wound. Wiping away tears, I forced myself to calm down. This deep-seated hatred needed avenging. I had a half hours left. I rushed into the high-end apartment building across the street, using my fingerprint to access the penthouse. Since my parents preferred my brother, I left home early and hustled in society. Luckily, I met a boss who led me to success in the new economic trend. Last year, I fully paid off a house and a car. This penthouse, over 200 square feet, offered a view hundreds of times better than theirs. Reflecting on how we cramped together in that small house I bought, letting them live and eat there, I felt like slapping myself. Guilty over my father's passing, I was swayed by my mom's tears and invited them over, forgetting all past grievances. Bringing them home was a colossal mistake. Thankfully, I never told them about my two properties due to their favoritism. I opened the fridge, noticing some vegetables were spoiled after being away for a while. With limited time, I disposed of the bad ones. I ordered lots of groceries, meat, snacks, household items, marking them for multiple addresses. My fingers cramped from tapping and praising the convenience of delivery apps. When I reached the ready-to-eat section, I also ordered lobster, barbecue, cake, fried chicken, and 10 milk teas. In the apocalypse, these would be hard to come by, except barbecue. Stored in the fridge, they'd last a couple more days. To keep my supplies secret, deliveries were split across different buildings, left in parking garages. With it being a workday afternoon, as long as no one driving sees it, and I'm cautious in the elevators, it should be fine. Once done, my scheduled cargo van arrived. Hopping in, I directed the driver to the largest appliance store to buy freezers, fans, and more. On the drive, I ordered mineral water delivered to various floors under my apartment, knowing they were vacant. Moving water was heavy work, so efficiency was key. Just then my phone rang, showing Mom's name. Fighting the nausea, I answered. "Doesn't your bank card have thousands? Why is the balance suddenly too low?" Her sharp voice pierced my ears. jolting me awake. Bank card. I checked my wallet. Damn, the card I used for all those purchases was missing. Transfer the money now. I need 5 grand to pay for your brother's lunch. 5 grand. I snorted. At one time, this would have upset me since she never treated me to a decent meal. But now, Mom, I'll transfer you 100 grand in a bit so you and little bro can buy some new clothes. Getting close to the electronics store, I didn't want to waste more time with her. Buy more things and come home as late as possible. Oh, your brother wants those AJs and a game console. Send over an extra 20 grand. Before I could say anything, she hung up swiftly. The driver next to me was silent for a while before letting out a sigh. Man, if you hadn't called her Mom, I'd have thought you were a young girl owing a loan shark. I shrugged, showing my helplessness. In the end, I only sent 10 grand. When the phone rang again, I couldn't be bothered to answer it. Only 6 hours left. I quickly picked several large freezers and a few silent fans. Passing through the electronics section, I grabbed a few phones, tablets, and laptops. Paid an extra $2,000 to have drama series, movies, novels, and single-player games preloaded on them. Snagged a bunch of freebie power banks too. While they were loading the freezers, I spotted a shelf behind their warehouse and spent some extra cash to sway the manager into selling it to me. I left the movers to haul and arrange everything into the truck while I hopped into a taxi. Time was tight, and I couldn't oversee them moving stuff anyway. I'd already tipped them well. Seemed like things should be fine. In the cab, I handed the driver $1,000 and told him to take the long way around to my place. Whenever we passed a hardware store, I'd buy tools, hammers, sticks, locks, lights, and such. If we went by a pharmacy, I'd stock up on some meds and vitamins. Hit up a bookstore, grabbed a bunch of books and comics. If there's a convenience store, I'd get some snacks and essentials too. Better safe than sorry. After my umpteenth purchase, the driver couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. Young lady, what you're up to? I'm supporting the disaster area. Once he heard that, he was fired up, speeding up the ride right away. Every time I hopped out, he'd jump out too to help me carry stuff. With his help, I got home much faster than I thought. I gave him some meds and a toolbox, urging him to head home early today. But he just smiled, waved it off, and gave me a pack of candies meant for his son, asking me to send his regards to the kids in the disaster area. 4 hours left. I lugged all the stuff I bought along the way into the house, almost collapsing onto the couch after a few minutes. The moving truck arrived soon after, dragging my tired body downstairs again. The driver was already bent over, ready to help move the heavy freezers inside. Just as I wanted to politely decline, he interrupted with a hopeful tone. After this, I can head back to see my kids. Silently, I helped him move everything in, handing him some meds and groceries, urging him to finish up and go home soon. He thanked me repeatedly, driving off in the big truck. Watching him leave, a sad thought lingered. If my family had even an ounce of that integrity, maybe I wouldn't be this cold-hearted now. I hustled all the water and online ordered groceries up with a dolly repeatedly. Thankfully, after a few trips, I barely bumped into anyone. Even when I did, I covered stuff with a cloth, so nobody could tell, and I stayed in the clear. With just 1 hour left before the zombie outbreak erupted, I managed to move everything in. I found some cameras from the company that my boss let me keep. I had tossed them into this house casually back then. Grabbing some groceries and supplies, I picked a few cameras and headed back to my former home. Unlocking the door, thankfully they weren't back yet. I quickly hid the cameras and connected them to a small solar panel. Used double-sided and clear tape to secure the solar panel onto the air conditioning unit outside. It was hidden from view inside unless the AC was turned on, which would attract zombies, making it an ideal spot. Wanting to catch every moment, the solar setup would let me watch the places even with the power out. Finishing up the prep work and about to leave, but Mom and Bro walked in. No, Wendy and David walked in. Could hear their cheery voices before they even opened the door. Once they saw me, their expressions switched right to stern mode. David casually tossed bags with designer logos at me. Go wash these clean and get me some fruit. I want to play games. Back then, I probably would have done it like a meek dog. Why? Because I was raised to think my brother's status was always above mine. Looked at his smug face, feeling only a lingering fear amid a sea of resentment. Thinking of the fake sibling bond he manipulated me with in the apocalypse, disgust welled up. What are you staring at? Didn't you hear your brother? Stupid girl not answering calls. Who knows what you've been up to? Didn't you say you'd send 120K? Why only 100K? Maybe because my look was too resentful. Wendy yanked my ear hard. Ow. Mom, stop it. I invested it and can't get it back right now. Swallowing my discomfort, I faked my old obedient self. Invested in what? Get it back by tomorrow. Gave too little money, and I couldn't even buy clothes. Enjoy seeing your mom embarrassed, huh? How'd I end up with a thing like you? Wendy spat out angrily. Didn't I give you 100,000? Clutching my ear in pain. Didn't you see all the clothes, shoes, and game consoles your brother got? No money left for mine. Wendy got more riled up, yanking harder. The pain reawakened old memories of abuse, flooding my mind once more. I held back the pain as I glanced at David lying on the couch, playing games by himself. He was half slouched, gaming away with a straw from a Coke in his mouth, completely ignoring the chaos on our side. If it weren't for what happened in the past, I might have just thought I didn't get along well with my brother. But now I see he never saw me as his sister, not even as a person. Fighting the splitting pain in my ear, I looked at the clock hanging on the wall. It read 7:43. My breath caught. Only 17 minutes left until the zombie outbreak. And it takes me just about that long to get back to my place. There's no time. Mom, stop pulling. I'll go get it right now. Wendy, hearing me, let go with a skeptical look. Really? She's a doctor from a small town and doesn't understand anything about investments. She glanced at David as if seeking confirmation. Watching this scene made me scoff internally. I used to think Wendy favored boys over girls, but now I see she truly treated me like an outsider. She's always believed in him over me, but her calculations were way off. David never knew any better, always fighting, drinking, and gaming. How could he understand these things? What she didn't know was her pampered little home king was just good at bluffing. He pretended to think for a moment, then unsurprisingly told me to go out and get the money, along with some fried chicken and Coke for him. I plastered on a fake smile and agreed, eagerly nodding. Wait up. I'm coming with you to get it. My smile froze. After convincing her, she reluctantly let me leave. Once outside, I sprinted like never before, rushing back across to my building. At the fingerprint scanner, my hands were so sweaty from nerves that it took a while to get in. Standing at my door, I made sure to carefully check both the security and main door. Downstairs, I heard the screams start. My heart clenched tightly. Once I confirmed everything was locked, I shut the door and collapsed to the floor. The apocalypse had finally begun, with the screams echoing from below. I sipped my milk tea and nibbled on the skewers I ordered earlier. I couldn't care less about the news updates. Reporters getting bitten, mass panic. That was all old news to me. I opened the homeowners group chat for that side of the complex. As expected, everyone was talking about the horrors unfolding outside. The building management tried to reassure the owners that government aid was on the way and urged them to stay inside with windows and doors locked. The mixed crowd made the chat chaotic and overwhelming, filled with complaints and fear. Then suddenly, the onslaught of messages stopped at one particular inquiry. Is anyone selling food? It's too dangerous to go out, and I've got nothing to eat at home. In these times, people were still hesitant, not wanting to take risks easily. I saw a familiar profile icon pop up with a reply. I've got veggies. 1 cabbage for 50,000. I smirked. My silly brother took the bait. What the hell? Why don't you just rob us instead? Yeah, we're neighbors. Cut us some slack, will you? Before I left home, I intentionally stuffed the kitchen full. Fresh vegetables, fruits with dewdrops, looking all too abundant. Broke idiots. Can't afford it? Then keep quiet. David posted a screenshot in the group, showing a big spender transferring 500,000. Then he uploaded several photos of his stocked-up fridge filled with food and drinks. The chat went silent for a moment. Then, a few wealthy owners eagerly popped up again. I'll buy it, kid. Count me in. Me too. I'll transfer 200,000. Can I choose what I get? I want in. Sell it all to me at whatever price. I switched to the security feed. High-def cameras are great. I could see those two grinning like maniacs all too clearly. We're rich. We're rich. Mom, I could end up the richest man from this. David's eyes were bloodshot with excitement. He'd never had this much money in his life before. Wendy patted him proudly, expressing how much smarter he was compared to me, her dumb daughter. Watching them rake in the cash so fully satisfied, I curled my lips. Just as I'd thought. These two dimwits never understood the value of food, past life or this one. Doors were knocked one after another. David let people in to pick their food, boasting about his full fridge the whole time. Each guest looked on with shock and envy, feeding David's arrogance. What are you looking at? Hurry up and scram once you're done choosing. Only 10,000? Take this pathetic cabbage and get lost. They left obediently, taking their goods and bowing their heads, running so fast out of fear that David would take it back. In the group chat, those who got something started to kiss up to David, hoping for more the next time. But the chat suddenly went eerily silent, with no one replying to the sycophants. Back on the security feed, David's crazed laughter rang out again. Ha ha ha. Made 4 million today. Never thought money was so easy to earn. Son, keep it down. You'll attract those nasty things outside. Wendy tugged at her precious son nervously. David sneered at Wendy. What are you afraid of? Zombies got into the building across the street. The doors downstairs here are locked. They can't get in. With Lily gone, we're living the good life. They get eaten, and I rake in the cash. Right. My son's got all the luck. Mom's living well with you. Wendy added bitterly, good riddance to Lily. I'm glad I didn't go with her to get the money. Who knows which corner I'd be dead in now. I couldn't be bothered to hear them trash-talking me anymore. Just as I was about to turn off the monitor, Wendy let out a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness for the zombie outbreak, or we'd never get this place from your sister. Now that she's dead, once this is all over, this home will be yours by right. My fingers froze on the keyboard, and what David said next chilled me to the bone. That bitch was never worthy to be my sister. Good thing she's dead. Saved me the trouble of doing it myself. David was intensely fascinated by the knife in his hand, the blade gleaming coldly after a good sharpening. I quickly shut my laptop and curled up in fear. The aura of death enveloped me as memories of my past life collided with the sight of that knife, suffocating me. I wiped away the cold sweat and gradually composed myself. I had thought they waited until they were starving to target me last time. Turns out, even without the zombie outbreak, I wouldn't have survived. Alright then. I chuckled and sent Wendy a pre-written text message. I can't wait to see your performance, Wendy. Don't disappoint me. The next morning, I opened a bag of frozen dumplings and made some soy milk for breakfast. If it weren't for the screams from downstairs, it would have been a pretty lovely breakfast. On the monitor, David excitedly planned how to make more money. Wendy's expression was off. Her usually agreeable voice was slower than usual. Someone knocked on the door again. David instinctively went to open it, but the menacing man outside made him freeze. In an instant, the man punched David to the ground. David clutched his stomach, crying out in pain, while Wendy screamed, trying to help him, only to be slapped down by another thug. The leader of the intruders waltzed in, his excitement growing with each step. Wow, look at all this food. We're set for a while. You got that right, boss. Good thing we barged into that house, which pretty much led us here. Plenty of food and no zombies, awesome. One of the thugs complimented while stuffing vegetables from the fridge into his backpack. He glanced at David, who looked pale as a ghost. You're quite something, letting us involuntarily after we busted into so many other places. That made everyone burst out laughing. David shook with anger, but before he could let out any profanities, Wendy quickly muffled him. Please, kind sirs, leave us some food. We're just a mother and child trying to survive. As the fridge got emptied, Wendy's face turned as white as a sheet. The leader walked over, grabbed David by the hair, and spat in his face. Don't pretend with me. Where's the rest of the food? Tell me, or I'll beat the hell out of you. David fired back in anger, spitting in the man's face. All my life, I've been the one bullying others, and now you think you're someone special? Get lost, or I won't hold back. Hearing David's defiant words, a terrified Wendy crawled to the man's feet, begging for mercy. The man only laughed, kicking her aside, and dragged David over to the window. David winced from the pain in his back. Just as he was about to cry out, he was silenced by the scene below. Below was a horde of blood-covered zombies, twisting their grotesque faces at the sight of David, charging at the fragile door downstairs. The sheer horror left David speechless. "I'll give you one more chance. Talk, or I'll toss you down there. There's really nothing left, I swear." David sobbed, shaking his head wildly in fear. Any defiance from earlier vanished. The man smirked, his hand poised to unlock the window. "Then get ready to feed the zombies." "Wait a minute. Don't hurt my son." Wendy quickly crawled over to hold her son in her arms. It took her a while to muster up the courage to speak. "There's some food in the wardrobe." After she said that, sure enough, they found some instant noodles in the wardrobe. Immediately, they turned the house upside down. Only when they heard one of the lackeys say that zombies were about to rush in from downstairs did they begrudgingly leave, hauling large bags with them. David looked at the mess in the kitchen. All his pent-up anger was directed at Wendy. "You old hag, hiding food from me." David shoved Wendy to the ground and, ignoring the fear in her eyes, tightly gripped her neck. "It wasn't me. They took all the food. What am I supposed to do? They stole all my meat. How are you going to make it up to me?" David yelled, his voice filled with pain. "That's your sister." Wendy's eyes rolled back as she was being choked. "You're talking about Lily? What do you mean? Explain yourself." David let go, and Wendy started gasping for air. She realized she'd almost met her end. Thinking about that text message, her belief in it both grew and chilled her. "Your sister's still alive." As soon as she said that, David got a call. "Lily, where did you leave the food in the house? We're out of food, and we need something fast." I scoffed. "Are you nuts, David? The instant noodles I hid in the wardrobe got stolen. There's no food left in the house." "What do you mean? How do you know we got robbed of our noodles?" Before he could ramble on, I hung up the phone. Through the monitor, I saw him start another argument with Wendy. "Give me your phone." "No." Sweat dripped from Wendy's forehead as she tightly clutched the phone. The more she resisted, the more David suspected something was up with Wendy. "Why won't you give it to me? Did you tip her off?" Wendy shook her head frantically. While they were locked in their argument, there was a knock on the door. They flinched in fear. After some back and forth pushing, Wendy was forced toward the door to peer through the peephole. "Open the damn door. Bastard. We paid you and now you won't open the door for us?" They immediately realized what was happening. The house had just been looted, so what was left? They played dumb, staying completely silent. The person outside seemed to know they were faking, and started banging right on the door. The door was rattling loudly, and I watched as David's face turned pale with fear. His hands were shaking as he dialed again. "Lily, sis, I messed up, okay? I didn't know better before. You must have left some food for the family, right? Save me, there are people outside demanding veggies. Our door is about to break." David looked at the door, which was about to fall off its hinges, while curses flew around outside. His voice was desperate and on the verge of tears. Cease. I'm begging you. The door is really about to give in. If they come in and don't get what they want, they'll definitely beat me up." I pretended to sigh. "David, you're my little brother after all. I can't just watch you get beaten to death." The sheer saintly tone almost made me gag. As expected, David was overjoyed. "Sis, I knew you were the best. Here's the deal. 1 veggie for 500 grand. Pay up, and I'll tell you where they are." Silence on the line for a moment. Then 10 seconds later, David exploded. "Lily, are you out of your mind? What? Can't afford it? Then stop talking." I acted like I was going to hang up, and David quickly begged, No. Soon, several transaction notifications pinged my phone, totaling 8 million. "Sis, now can you tell me? The door's about to bust open." David looked at the door, which was really just an ordinary one, not built for this kind of abuse. "Don't worry." I hung up. "Worry? No way I'm letting you get off that easy." In the surveillance, David was fuming after hearing the call disconnect. Just as he was about to call back to rip into me, he heard screams from outside. "Ah, zombies have broken in." Run! The chaos outside was filled with zombie roars and people screaming, plunging everything into a frenzy. Oh my God, thank goodness the zombies broke in. Wendy was drenched in sweat and quickly moved some heavy objects to block the door. David was in shock, then he started cursing. But the moment he did, the zombies outside were drawn to the sound, frantically pounding on the already weak door. David quickly shut his mouth, but another scream nearby distracted the zombies, drawing them away from his door. Then my phone buzzed again. David cursed under his breath, "Lily, you knew the zombies were coming, didn't you? Give me my money back." Of course I knew. I was watching the door cam, timing it with the zombies' arrival. Sorry, no refunds. If you want it so bad, come out and get it. The place was teeming with zombies. David didn't have the guts to step outside. Otherwise they wouldn't have tried to rely on me last time. You, either give me my money back, or tell me where the veggies are. How could I not tell you? I did get a payment after all. The food's in the fire hydrant by the elevator outside. Go ahead and get it. After hearing this, David was so mad he nearly smashed the phone, while I happily hung up. This was merely the beginning. In the following days, the water and power gradually got cut, but David and Wendy didn't stop spewing insults at me through texts. I drank delicious soup cooked in my rice cooker and sighed contentedly. Luckily, I remembered hearing about solar panels being efficient, so I picked some up out of curiosity. Now they're coming in handy. I watched the surveillance, where the two of them sat on the couch burdened with their own worries, not saying a word. David managed to find a stash of snacks under his bed, but he downed them all himself, leaving none for his mom. He had a bit of energy left. On the couch, he whined about being hungry, while Wendy hadn't eaten for days, too weak to speak. Hugging his growling stomach, he recalled the message I sent last night, subtly reminding him, "There's meat in the fire hydrant." Sure enough, after pacing around with doubt, he suddenly pushed Wendy off the couch. "Lily said there's food in the hydrant outside. Why don't you go bring it in?" Wendy in disbelief stared at him. With one foot practically in the grave, he expected her, the older one, to go out there? "What are you looking at? Go get it. Now." David still acted like he was the pampered young master of the past. I smirked. The way the two ordered people around sounded exactly the same. Taking advantage of the temporary absence of zombies, David yanked Wendy by the collar towards the door. Wendy caught sight of a nearby lurking zombie and turned pale, desperately clinging to the door. "Let go, you stubborn old hag. Do you want your son to starve?" "My boy, I'm old. I can't outrun zombies. You're sending me to my death," Wendy cried despairingly. David's eyes burned with anger. Zombies, having heard the commotion, twisted their bodies and charged at them. Seeing the menacing zombies barreling towards them, David was frozen in fear, giving Wendy a chance to slip back inside and close the door. Once the door was shut, countless zombies roared outside, fiercely pounding on it. The door, already damaged, was now cracking. It wouldn't last much longer. The two scrambled into the bedroom, locking themselves in. A while later, the sound of something heavy being smashed came from outside. Their door must have been destroyed. Huddled together, trembling in fright, they didn't dare to make a sound. The slow and haunting moans of zombies outside hammered at their hearts. For days, they were trapped inside the bedroom, unable to leave. Going to the bathroom meant wrapping it in clothes and leaving it in the corner. A sickening stench hung around the closed room. Wendy, starved and nauseated by the disgusting odor, looked half dead. I activated the bedroom intercom with my computer, watching her. "There's food hidden in this room." Wendy suddenly jolted, her previously dull eyes lighting up with life. "Where?" David, too hungry to notice my surveillance in the room, asked eagerly. "All they want now is to survive." I didn't respond directly, just speaking to myself. "Do you know where I am now? I'm in a huge apartment in another neighborhood, with enough food to last a lifetime." Hearing this, David got angry again. I was just about to ask, "How dare you talk like that? Why don't you hurry up and take us there? I'm starving." Wendy, trembling, fell to her knees, pleading desperately. "Oh daughter, I was wrong. I'm about to starve. I don't ask you to take us there. Just tell me where the food is hidden in this house." "You old fool." David slapped Wendy across the face. "We can find what's hidden in the house ourselves. We need her to get us out of this hellhole. Fine. I'll come for you, I said softly and then hung up. David went crazy, flipping the bedroom, but came up empty-handed. Despair washed over Wendy, and she started to cry. You wretched child. If I had known, I'd have let that guy throw you out of the window back then. David recoiled at the memory of being pushed against the window. What nonsense are you saying? If you hadn't saved me, you'd have no son. Wendy smacked away David's hand, mistrust filling her eyes. Other people have sons for support in old age, but having you is my punishment. David watched Wendy, who seemed on edge, and backed away a bit in fear. Wendy, glaring with her blurred eyes, moved to hit David, but she had no strength left, and ended up being pushed to the floor by David. Looking at her precious son, once cherished more than anything, she let out a bitter laugh. Oh, you're such a good son, treating your mom like this. I should have expected it. You even planned on taking out your own father, so I'm getting off easy. Ignoring David's questions, she kept speaking sarcastically. If your sister hadn't texted me a while back, I would have never known. Your dad drove a truck, and just because he told you to study hard and criticized you a little, you put sleeping pills in his drink? You wanted him dead. She couldn't possibly know. David's shocked expression revealed everything. Looking at the defeated Wendy, David's eyes filled with disdain, and he sneered. Don't lecture me. Weren't you happily counting the insurance money when he died? You. Wendy almost choked with rage. He's gone, but I take what's due. We could have lived comfortably forever in the county with that money. Unlike these city folks, lacking all decency. If you hadn't always told me that my sister's stuff is mine, even the house, I wouldn't have come running here. David shouted, gripping Wendy's neck, as she fought back in pain. David's face was scratched by Wendy's nails, and just as he was about to strike her down, a memory flashed in his mind. In it, he saw himself with a knife, attacking a woman tied to a bed, and she clawed at him. His mind went blank, and instinctively, his hand reached for the knife in his waistband. He thought he heard his mom's screams echoing in his ears. When he came back to his senses, he saw Wendy's left foot bleeding out. His gleaming knife was lodged in it. David had stuffed her mouth with a sock. She clumsily tried to bandage herself, unable to scream through the pain. I was surprised Wendy wasn't dead yet, but judging by her pale face, it wouldn't be long now. I told them the food was hidden in the ceiling. David found some bread, water, and a basic medical kit. Now David dared not be rough with me. When I told him where the food was, he apologetically asked when I'd come get him. With this food and some antiseptics, Wendy's face looked slightly better. I breathed a sigh of relief. Killing them would be too easy, but that's not the ending I picked for them. Sipping on my freshly brewed coffee, sleep had been rough these days, disturbed by dreams from a past life. Watching them through the surveillance, whenever Wendy and David looked at each other, they trembled, neither daring to speak to him. They had been locked in the bedroom too long. The smell, combined with Wendy's strange gaze, had gotten to David. Yes, he started abusing Wendy, just like he treated me in a past life. But today, instead of beating her, he took out a knife and sliced off her bandaged left foot. Wendy didn't even have a chance to scream before David slapped her down. Sis can only take one person, and that's gonna be me. You're just trouble. Once this zombie thing ends, you'd probably drag me to court. You should just die now, David said coldly, then ran to the monitor to plead. Sis, Mom can't walk. She broke her leg. If you can only take one, take me. I'm a man. I can help kill zombies. Listening, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. If you could handle zombies, would you have needed to eat off me last life? Or let your old mom fetch food this time while hiding yourself at home? Clearing my throat, I regretfully said, Brother, how could you? After all, she is our mom. Seeing a moment of warmth in Wendy's eyes, I quickly dashed her hopes with cold reality. Feigning sadness, I sighed. Well, you're the only male in the family. If not you, who else? Right, Mom? Didn't you teach us this? When I objected long ago, you even hit me. Wendy froze, ignoring the pain in her leg, crying hoarsely. Oh, daughter. I was wrong, confused then. I beg you, save me your brother, he's heartless. But isn't this your lesson? Back in middle school, when I refused your brother pocket money, he pushed me down the stairs. I was in casts for months and told you he wasn't decent, but you said he was the only son, and I had to yield. And back then, my acceptance letter got sent home. You said the family couldn't afford 2 kids in school. You sacrificed me, let him go to school. Now you're sacrificing yourself for your brother to survive. Got a problem with that? With each word, Wendy froze up a little more. She dragged her leg, crawling slowly to the monitor, her smile looking uglier than crying. Sweetheart, I just felt bad for your young brother. That's all. Oh, then I won't talk about that. Why don't you tell me when my birthday is? Wendy was visibly dumbstruck, her cracked lips opening and closing, but not a word came out. Yeah, since we were kids, she only ever cared about her son. Her daughter? Never even thrown a birthday party. The only time must have been before David was born. But it was so long ago, she didn't really remember the exact day. I snorted, speaking softly again. David, I'll pick you up in a couple of days. David was over the moon. All right, sis. After I hung up the monitor, he turned and struck Wendy, knocking her to the ground. I'm no good. You're not much better. Son, I'm your mom. Wendy's despairing cries didn't stop David. Turning off the monitor, I took a lovely bath with the stored water and cooked a Western-style steak for dinner. Reopening the camera, I almost threw up. David had chopped off Wendy's left leg, grilling it with the lighter from his room. The scene made me really uncomfortable, but I sort of expected it, so it didn't take long to get over it. With the arrival of zombies and food scarcity, this time Wendy had become the food. Watching him ask Wendy if she wanted some meat, she also vomited a lot. I glanced down at the blood-red steak on my plate, just like Wendy's leg, lost my appetite instantly, and tossed it in the trash. David handled her like he did me in the last life, expertly cutting to prolong her life without ending it too soon. Meanwhile, David kept bugging me about when I'd come to get him. I just told him to wait a little longer. Wendy already looked hollow, eyes vacant, slumped in the corner. But David wasn't soft-hearted, feeding her meat to keep her from starving. She ate and vomited, turning into a walking corpse eventually. 2 more months passed, and David got sick of it. He cried and begged me for more food. I told him there were tons of snacks and steaks by the fire hydrant outside, and he could use the lighter to cook the meat. By now, David totally believed everything I said. After a few days gathering courage, he secretly opened the long-sealed bedroom door. The front door had been destroyed, and the zombies seemed to have left, not finding anyone around. David gasped, slipping outside and rushing to the elevator, grabbing a big black wrapped bag from the fire hydrant. Clutching the heavy bundle, he excitedly walked back, only to find zombies at the doorway. The zombies' eyes lit up at the sight of a human, sprinting fast toward him. Scared out of his wits, clutching the bag, David ran the other way, not realizing more zombies were ahead. He shut his eyes, his legs trembling uncontrollably. Just then, a door opened in front of him, pulling him inside. The door shut, and before David could see who it was, starting a shaky thank you, his bundle got snatched away. Well, look who it is. Seeing some familiar faces, David turned pale with fear. Once he went out for food, David never came back. Refusing to believe he'd been bitten by zombies, I sent a drone from home looking for him in the neighborhood. After circling a bit without spotting a zombie like David, I realized he had run the other way. Maybe he'd hidden in an open apartment? In an instant, flying my drone window by window on my home's level, I searched. My hunch was right. He was in the apartment diagonal to ours. And the people inside, they were the same thugs who raided and stole food from us. Sound through the window wasn't clear, but it seemed like David ended up delivering his goods to them once more. Although, everything inside the package was spoiled. Edible, sure, but likely to cause an upset stomach. Originally, I wanted David to experience the horror of being chased by zombies, scraping by with food even pigs wouldn't touch. But he'd been intercepted. What happened next was even more unexpected. These men hadn't had any nightlife in months. Though David looked run down, he was still a decent-looking young guy. David found himself overwhelmed by a group of men. Pleading and shouting didn't change the situation he was in. The knife he always had at his waist, now tossed to the floor along with his clothes. Back at the monitor, Wendy looked almost lifeless. With David unable to return, I used the drone to deliver some food and water to Wendy daily. She wanted to die, countless times sobbing to the drone, begging me to end it for her. But I refused. Every time she clamped her mouth shut, refusing the bread I sent, I'd ram a drone into her stomach. As she screamed in pain, I'd have another drone toss the bread into her mouth. Often choking, she'd rush to gulp water. Once she asked, "Sweetheart, have you forgiven me?" I replied coldly, "No. I'm worried David will come back hungry. At least then, he'd have fresh meat." I returned her words exactly. After hearing that, Wendy went back to being lifeless, her eyes empty, her spirit crushed just like mine once was. Meanwhile, on the drone feed, David looked worn down to the brink. These men took turns with him every day. Occasionally, they brought some girls inside. Yet before he could feel lucky, these girls were thrown out of the window for resisting too fiercely, dying on impact. Shocked, pale, fearful for his life, David silently resigned himself to his fate. Months passed, and those thugs went outside looking for food, coming back empty-handed. When they couldn't find food, they stayed home all day tormenting David. Maybe because they were so aggressive that they dislocated his arm. After a while, they hadn't eaten for a long time either. Their looks toward David became more and more unfocused, and one day, David ran out of the house like he was crazy. He overheard them deciding to eat him. He stumbled back home, tears streaming down his face when he ran into his bedroom and saw Wendy. "Mom." Wendy actually looked better than David. After all, David hadn't eaten anything decent over there, and was already starving, looking frail and reeked terribly. David rushed into Wendy's arms, but Wendy grabbed a hammer and swung it at his head. "Die. Just die. You think about eating me?" David cried out in pain, seeing the security footage, and begged me, "Sis. Sis, help me." I sneer, "Do you think you're fit to be my brother? It's good if you die. Saves me the trouble of doing it myself." David was familiar with these words, but before he could explain, Wendy smashed his face with the hammer again. It's been a year since the apocalypse started, and now it's snowing. As I sat snacking on chips, watching the latest downloaded drama, tears rolled down my cheeks as I admired the epic love story between the Moon Lord and the goddess. Suddenly, the radio sitting next to me crackled with static. I quickly paused the show and turned up the radio volume. The familiar official voice announced that the country had solved most of the zombie issues and created community bases for citizens. Those who lack supplies can go there. Soon, they'll eliminate all zombies, encouraging everyone not to give up. After hearing that, I felt pumped up. Looking at the stockpile of supplies at home, I thought maybe I should donate some to the base. There's so much stuff, it could feed me for decades. I waited a bit, and now army vehicles were on the streets picking up people to take them to the base. I packed up 50 boxes of supplies, using my trusty little cart to move them down in several trips. When I handed them to the soldiers in uniform, they were moved to tears and insisted on taking me on a tour of the base to show their gratitude. They also mentioned that there were hardly any zombies left. If I still felt uneasy, they'd bring me back on their next mission. Not wanting to dampen their hopeful looks, and feeling curious myself about the outside world I'd never seen before, I went with them. The base was converted from a school. It was huge, orderly, not chaotic at all. Everyone there had expressions I hadn't seen in a long time, smiles. They learned of my donation and came over, thanking me. As I wandered around, a mother with a little boy approached me. "Sister, have you been abroad?" the boy timidly asked. I crouched down and gently asked, "No, why do you ask, little guy?" He showed me a pack of candy, and I instantly recognized it as the ones the driver uncle gave me when I bought supplies. I told him I was donating them to children in disaster areas, so I figured I'd pass on the love and give them to the kids here. I patted his head. "A driver uncle gave this to me, so I'm passing it on to you cute kids." The boy beamed. "My dad's a driver. He knows a lot of people. There's no way to buy this candy here right now. The last time he called Mom, he said he got some. But then he said he donated it to disaster area kids." At that moment, I was stunned, marveling at the coincidence. "Where's your dad?" "This candy's from him." "Sister, my dad's working on post-disaster rebuilding. Soon we'll have a new home." I remembered the uncle who helped me move things, always with a big smile. I nodded heavily. Life is always full of hope. Not long after, they killed the last zombie. Turns out it was running too fast on the prairie, and it took them half a day to catch up and kill it. I returned to the house. Opening the door, the stench almost knocked me out. Wendy was still trembling in the corner, her mouth smeared with blood. Next to her was David's decayed, disfigured body, eyes wide open, arm dislocated, clearly not at peace even in death. His limbs were gone, pretty much confirming what happened. Wendy ate David too. I took Wendy to the hospital. She had lost her lower half. Her waist was already rotting and smelled putrid. The doctors confirmed she was paralyzed for life. After 2 weeks, Wendy became a bit more aware. I whispered in her ear, pretending to remind her, "Hey Mom, why did you eat your son? He was our family's only male heir. How will we continue the family line?" Her whole body shook, terror making her tremble uncontrollably, and she vomited, collapsing off the bed, sitting on the floor. Ignoring the strange looks from others, she cried and laughed. She might have been crying for her lost son or laughing because he was finally gone. A few days later, the doctor informed me that Wendy had developed schizophrenia and depression, oscillating between trying to kill someone and attempting suicide. A few days after that, I got another call saying she jumped out of the hospital room. But fortunately, she landed on some bushes, saving her life. However, it left her with multiple fractures. I visited her, just as she once visited me when I lay in bed with a fracture. Useless. How do you get multiple fractures from this? Staying alive is just wasting money. Might as well be dead. These were the words she used to scold me. Now I returned each one. I stood there healthy, while she could only remain on the bed, paralyzed for life, never able to leave. After countless years, when I forgot about her, and she was left unattended with paralysis, would she end up dying on a silent night just like I once did? After leaving the hospital, I went to the police station and changed my name. From then on, Lily no longer existed in this world, and I hope to live happily forever. Of course, I know I'll live happily, especially since I still have 8 million in my account. The end.